Hey, everybody. Today for you, podcast number 56. Today's podcast is titled, Get In and Slow the Current. Hey. Welcome back to this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. I am Dr. Pete Lombardi, and this is the Limitless Life Network podcast where we flesh out the limitations that are preventing you from reaching your goals and living the life that you were called to lead. And with me today, again, back by popular demand, everybody likes to hear my wife, my beautiful wife, Sandy Lombardi. The star of the show. No, but great. We're glad. We love producing this podcast, and I want to take a moment to thank everybody once again. I don't know about you this week. Did you have any new people come up and say something to you?
Yeah, actually, I did.
Oh, super cool. So tell me about the person that you don't have to mention their name.
Well, he was impressed with one of the reels that came off the podcast and wondered how we were producing such professional reels. So
Oh, okay. Yeah.
gave him the inside scoop on that.
So that was cool. And so I had somebody tell me, I went mountain biking this weekend, and a guy that I never met before was in the group of riders, and he said, "Hey, I see you have your own podcast. I checked it out, and it's really good. I think I'll be listening to it." So I thought that was really cool. I'm like, okay, out of nowhere. That's awesome. But we love our listeners. We really are grateful for you, and thank you for tuning in. We know your time is precious, and we thank you for sharing it with us. If you really like the content, be sure to hit the subscribe button, and you can share it with a friend as well. So that is super fun. So let's go on with the show. Here we go. Today's episode is titled Get In and Slow the Current. So my wife has probably the best backstory this week. It has to do with, I think, being busy, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe some of you can relate. September just comes in and it's, start of new sports seasons and school, and just feels like, I said to Pete last week, it was our anniversary, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to see you for the day. And it's just, it feels like a marathon. Like it's just not stopping. And I think as we get older, we realize it's not always just a season. Sometimes that's just life. And so the first point we had was hurry always empties a soul. And that was from a book I'm reading, 1,000 Gifts. And it was talking about time, and that time is a relentless river, and it's rages on, respecter of no one. And the only way to slow time is to fully enter the current of the river and be present, be current, be present in that moment. And then you are, quote, slowing time. There is no way to slow time, right? We all get that. But
Right.
We can make time more valuable by getting in the current and being fully present everywhere we are.
Yeah, I see that today. That is such a need in our culture because we have so many things vying for our attention that we think because our body is physically there that we are present. But if our 100% focus and intent is not engaged, then it's a shallow representation of who you really are, and it's really robbing not only the person that you're trying to be intentional with, but it's robbing you most importantly too.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
Yeah, it is. I catch myself in that. And as long as we catch ourselves, right, realizing like, okay, I need to check and get present with the person that's in front of me.
Yeah, time waits for no one, for sure. As one of my practice members once said, he said, "Father Time is undefeated."
That's good.
All right. What do we have for point number 2?
Your weakness is the perfect landing place. And that was, I took from a speaker last night. We had a phenomenal ladies' event at our church. And Shelley just gave a really powerful message about weakness, and that for many of us, maybe it's our upbringing. We find shame in our weakness. We were taught to never acknowledge a weakness, hide a weakness. And so we talked a lot about that, in that our weakness is where God comes in, and it gives him a chance in all his glory to work through you in that weakness, and that he actually dwells in our weakness, and that
Mm-hmm.
we actually talked about picturing a tent, him abiding with us, and in this tent, this tabernacle is over us. And if we can be in that, and in that tent and under his covering, that there is rest in our weakness. And really powerful to sit and think about your weaknesses. And I think for myself, some of them that I became aware of, I didn't even acknowledge, you know?
Oh, for sure. You know what that makes me think of too? Like in the business world, they always talk about if you're not good at something, or if you don't like to do something, then you need to delegate it or hire it out. And it is liberating when you give it up. You have to surrender these weaknesses in a way too, in order to allow them to be filled and for you to be blessed. So I think that's a super good point.
That's a really good point, because it's humbling to surrender and to turn it
Mm-hmm.
over, whether it's something that is not valuable use of our time. We're just
Mm-hmm.
not gifted in that area. Like, it's just not in our wheelhouse,
Mm-hmm.
and it's better suited for someone else. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we could probably talk about that for a while, but we have 3 more fantastic points tonight, which I'm eager to hear. Point number 3.
Point number 3 was danger of comparison. And that kind of was a spin-off of point number 2 with our weaknesses. And we can get into a bad place if we start comparing ourselves when we feel weak to someone else who's strong in the area that we're feeling weak. And, we discussed that a lot too. And that's never a good place to be, comparing yourself with someone else. And weakness is usually a season, so we may be in a season of weakness right now in one area of our life, and someone else is excelling in that, but there will be a season where we're excelling in one area. So not a healthy place to be in comparison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always called that the comparison syndrome, because it tends to become a habit. It tends to be something that once you start doing it, you have a tendency to continue to do it. We talked about it when our son Timothy was on the podcast, because
Yes.
he was always comparing himself with his brothers,
Mm-hmm.
and his weaknesses were what he was looking at, and he was just seeing his weaknesses versus saying, "Hey, look at my strengths," and allowing my weaknesses to be delegated, allowing God to fill that void, and not try to be everything, right? Because
Yeah.
that's kind of what we feel. We all kind of feel that push where everything is expected from you, right? Like everything, like you've got to be 100% great at everything you do.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true, Like it just, we all can't be engineers, astronauts, rocket scientists, and gourmet chefs. Like it's just, and you could just keep going on and on with all the different traits and talents that people have. We just can't be everything. We all have weaknesses. So just look at what you're good at and allow those weaknesses to be filled, and stop looking at everybody else. Don't look over your shoulder so much.
Yeah, really good how they
Yeah.
all tie together.
Yeah, for sure. So point number 4, I think, is super valid. It's who are you listening to? Tell me more about that? That's intriguing to me.
Well, last night we had a time of prayer at the end of our evening, and one of the women that came up to me for prayer was just struggling with something in her life. And she said, I'm getting advice from so many different people, and they're people that she trusts and values their wisdom and their experience, many of them older than her. But she said, but I'm not sure which of these advice and which of these voices are lining up with what God has for me. And I shared with her, I said, I don't know for sure what God has for you, but I know from personal experience, there's been times in my life where I really felt God saying, I don't want you to go to anyone else about this. I want you to have this conversation only with me and to only seek my advice in this situation. And I would have to catch myself because I think it's our human nature to want to share and talk
Mm-hmm.
about things with, and that can be very healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are times when it's only to have the direction from God and just wait and see where He leads you in your journaling and your quiet time and really seek what He has for you. And so that was where that point came from, and the experience that I shared with that woman.
Yeah. It makes me think of so many things because when you think about people, some people are fixers, right? So they want to give you advice. So like, oh, you're coming to me with a problem. I think I want to solve that problem for you because that's what I do. I'm a fixer.
Mm-hmm.
And they may have just listened to your problem for about 1 minute. And now all of a sudden they've got the answer when they haven't been in it. They haven't lived it. And they may not even know you as well as they think they know you, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I mean, you may like them, you may trust them in a lot of ways, but nobody knows you as deeply as God knows you and as deeply as you know yourself.
Right.
So I find that really comical that we really value all these other people's advice when in reality they're not in it and they don't have really any skin in the game in most cases. So, always think about that. Like, who are you listening to? That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then point number 5, I think you just came upon this one tonight, didn't you?
I did. So it's who inspires you. And I was sitting down gathering my thoughts for the podcast in our bedroom. And in the basement below our bedroom was Grace, our 12-year-old, singing away. She has a karaoke machine and she thinks we can't hear her, but we can. And she's so sweet and loves to sing. So this point came to me. She was inspired at church today by this older teen. She's a senior in high school. And when we got there, she's like, Grace is singing to another girl named Grace. Grace is singing today. And she was just in awe of her all during the service. And so I think she was inspired by Grace today. So that's
Right.
just to get us talking about that. Who inspires you?
Yeah. Who inspires you? It's interesting because inspiration can come in many ways and it can come in many forms. But the word inspire really means to breathe life into. And oftentimes we need to have just a breath breathed into us, especially if you're the one that's always giving out, right? If you're the one that's always, serving and delivering and producing, right? And so to be inspired it's really awesome. I'm inspired by the presence of people that are uplifting, right? And just being around people like that are uplifting and positive, people that push me, people that demand more from me or expect more from me, that inspires me.
Mm-hmm.
And then just greatness whenever I see things that are great, that inspires me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But ultimately I would say, when I read the Word of God, that is the greatest inspiration that I think I get. It is the best way to start a day for me. So anything else you want to add?
No.
Fantastic. Great job. That's why you're in such high demand for this podcast, by the way.
Because I don't have any more comments.
Yeah,
Keep it short.
keep it short. Exactly. People like that. They comment on that. So, well, that's all we have for this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. Tune in each and every week to stay connected, be inspired, and keep moving toward your best life by stripping away your limitations. And we will see you back next week.
Good night.
Good night.